Welcome to Can TV 21. Let's talk etiquette. Such a joy in saying that word. Such a joy. But yes, we're back with you again, and please do not hesitate to give us a call at 312-738-1060. Do not hesitate. And I hope that lady that called last week give us a call today. But as we move forward, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce my very, very, very special co-host, Madam Georgia Selmon, etiquette maven extraordinary. Welcome once again to Can TV. Let's talk etiquette.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
You're quite
Again, it's
yes.
indeed a pleasure to be here and to be a part of this Let's Talk Etiquette discussion. I am excited. We're winding down.
Yes.
And I tell you, we have quite a bit to talk about. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here as well. And it's really been a joy. We are getting down to our very, very last two shows. But we're going to try to do something a little different for this show, because we believe it's so important to just point out some of the highlights of Chicago history. It is a grand history in this great windy city. And so our subject today is it's about etiquette, but it's also about social values and living in this great metropolis called Chicago. So let me put the heading of the show on the overhead so that you can see it. And would you give me the honors, madam, to read that to our audience?
Yes, Chicago Public Housing, an era in social, cultural, and moral equality.
Yes.
A formula for community success.
And I know most of those who live in Chicago and have lived here for some years are very familiar with Chicago Public Housing. And I just love the history of my memories when Chicago Public Housing was something very, very special. And we felt like this would be a great opportunity to talk about that history. What a wonderful, wonderful history for Chicago's immigrants who came from the South to find employment and housing in this great city. And just a brief history is really started in earnest after World War II, when the opportunities to come to Chicago, because Chicago was a booming town. It was jobs everywhere. It was really at the apex of what a great metropolis was all about in the Midwest. And Chicago and Detroit was one of the two great cities for that purpose. And so we were encouraged to migrate to the city of Chicago because of those opportunities. And the city fathers had a vision of providing quality housing for its new residents who came from Mississippi and Alabama and Arkansas to Chicago for a new life. And so those developments in communities were extraordinary. So we decided to take this opportunity to talk about them, because a few people really give any real consideration to that history. So we decided to go ahead and do that on this occasion. But I'd like to start out with Madam giving us some of the history she has of Chicago housing in this great city.
Well, I tell you, I can speak personally from public housing in Chicago because I am a product of public housing in Chicago. I grew up in Oakdale Gardens, the beautiful garden spot of America.
Yes.
Oakdale Gardens was once called. And it was an awesome upbringing community for me. I had wonderful experiences. I had a great education.
Yes.
It was very family oriented. That's where the start of my etiquette training began.
Yes.
And it was not just in the home,
Yes.
but it was a community involvement.
Yes.
So etiquette for me started at home and in the community.
Yes.
And I'm anxious to talk about some of the great experiences I had in community and growing up in a public community.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, when I first moved to the suburbs, one of the places that I was exploring to purchase was Park Forest.
Ah, yes, very familiar with
And
it.
one of the very, very beginning developments that I saw was the co-ops.
Yes, right.
And I said, wow.
That was exciting in that time, during that timeline.
Well,
The co-ops was very popular.
Yes. Well, by the time I moved out of public housing and into my adult life, I learned, and it was called, Altgeld Gardens was called projects.
Yes.
So I don't know where that name come from, but it was called projects. And I said, wow, projects.
Yes.
I go to Park Forest and I see the co-ops. I
Co-ops.
said, my word.
They don't call it projects.
I've
But
been
it's no
living
different.
in
And
co-ops
co-ops.
all of my life.
Right.
But because the homes were very, very similar, the community was very, very similar. And I have to just say this to you. Public housing, from my personal experience, was one of the most organized,
Yes.
structured, beautiful, upbringing community
Yes,
ever
it was.
that ever exist.
And we have to give credit to the fathers, the political fathers and leaders in the community during that period, because they were able to create an environment that provided all of the things a community needed.
Absolutely.
And they didn't spare. That first, after the war, mid-40s and forward, they did not spare in their vision of what they were creating in community life for those who would live in developments of that nature. And so it was really there for that transition from the rural life into employment and then into the regular community.
Yes,
So
yes.
they did think about everything you can imagine. Share some of that with us.
We had a community center, a children's building that included and encompassed every recreational activity that you can imagine.
Wow.
We
wow.
had dance lessons, tap dance, modern dance. We had tennis. We had volleyball. We had arts and craft. We had theater. We had year-round swimming.
Wow.
We could swim in weather like today
Yes.
because we had a year-round swimming pool.
Wow.
So we had quite a bit of activities
Yes.
that we didn't have to pay for.
Oh, wow. That's
we
special.
had two
That's special.
skating rinks.
2 skating rings.
Two skating rinks.
Wow.
We had just every imaginable activity a youth could desire and need.
Yeah. Wow. What a community.
Yes, indeed.
It has unfortunately developed somewhat of a negative in the recent years, I suppose.
Unfortunately.
Not because of something it has happened there. It's just simply, low income housing have developed this negative about violence and crime and drugs and all that stuff. Not necessarily Altgeld Gardens, but I'm saying in general.
I will
Like
I
the
cannot
Ickees,
understand.
those other communities that had all kinds of social issues. That
I can't understand what has happened because how can communities such as Altgeld Gardens, Ida B. Wells, Stateway Gardens,
yes.
all of the public housing facilities, how is it that those communities are not existing with the same culture, the same social values? Why aren't they? Why isn't it there today?
That's a great question.
And
That's a
it
great
hurts
question.
my heart because we didn't have violence in our community.
No.
We did not
No.
have violence in our community.
No.
And we lived with pride,
With pride.
with dignity,
yes.
with respect,
Yes.
self-respect, community respect.
Yes.
We grew up and we had just every imaginable activity.
Yes. Yes, you did. And that's true with Robert Taylor.
Yes.
When they first opened, that was a community that everyone wanted to move into.
Yes.
It was just that nice. And people were happy and families were whole. The father and the mother and the children all in one household. And I know a few families that lived in Robert Taylor and Stateway Gardens, and it was safe. You could go
Very
in there,
safe.
they had elevators, you can go in without any concern about being harmed or anyone disrespecting you. And so that whole lifestyle was something special. And the founding fathers, the mayors, and the governors during that period, did quite a job. And
Yes.
tell us more about your experiences.
Well, every parent was your parent. So you didn't
That's true.
have, you were not in a segregated community.
Mm-hmm.
Every parent was your parent. If your parent worked during the day and the other parents worked at night, you didn't have to worry about your children.
That's so true. Yes, that's so true.
They were not left alone, but
Yes.
every parent was your parent.
Yes,
Every parent was called Miss or Mr.
yes,
or Mrs.
yes.
and Mr. It was,
Mm-hmm.
and parents respect one another.
That's
If your child got out of line
Mhm.
and your neighbor saw your child out of line,
Yes.
you were allowed
Mhm.
or you took it upon yourself to correct that child's behavior.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And the parent was in agreement with you.
Oh, of course, absolutely. They were
It was not, don't you ever put your, or say,
no,
it was
no.
none of that.
And she wasn't lying.
She was not lying.
On you. She said you did it. She saw
You
you
did
did
it.
She did it.
Yes,
But
you did it.
those are wonderful Southern values that were brought here by our great grandparents who came to the North to
Yes.
find employment, and so
And they still exist in the South.
Oh yes, it still exists. Those same values.
They still exist. What happened to those values now? I can't begin to explain
Yes,
it.
yes. Well, back in that timeline, we had real community where we didn't have exterior influences like we have today. In terms of, you had a TV that had three channels on it.
Very true.
You had a radio with 2 or 3 stations on
Very
it.
true.
And so the real values were created by the community and the people who lived there. And the wonderful thing about the philosophy of public housing was they were fully in support of those values. And they provided swimming pools and all other recreational things,
Tennis.
and the tennis and staff
Volleyball.
there who understood the culture and values of that community, and they
Yes.
upheld it. So
Yes,
we
yes.
really have to take our hats off to the administrators of public housing during that period for that very reason. And so you had a upbringing that was so special, and I say so simply because normally you would think of traditional communities having those values, middle class communities having those values, but it was right there,
Exactly.
and you were happy.
We were not middle class,
No.
but we had a community that had a upper class mindset.
So true. Yes.
We had beliefs. We had all of the manners and morals that we talk about in etiquette. We
Yes.
had that.
Yes.
We grew up with those.
With that.
Yes, with those values and those
Right.
standards and those principles.
Yes.
And it wasn't just in your home, but it was in the community.
The community.
It was in the community.
They supported those values.
Yes.
And they stood for those values. And
They made sure that we had activities and recreations
yes,
to promote those values.
absolutely. Absolutely. And we were happy. There was a thing called happiness among the children.
Mm-hmm.
You had a life, and you had joy, you had friends, and you had a safety, a sense of being safe in your community, and that everybody cared about you. You was Miss Jones loved you, and say
And would reprimand you.
and would recommend you if you were doing something. So you had to be careful of what you said out of your mouth that they may hear, and let your parent know that you were acting in a way that wasn't appropriate.
Absolutely.
And you know what could be the consequences
That's right.
of getting a report from Mrs. Jones about your behavior.
Same situation in the school system.
It was. It was consistent.
Yes. Throughout the community.
Yes. It
From
was.
home outside, in the community center, and in the school.
And in the schools.
Right.
So true, so true. And I think those external influences have had an impact on society today and on communities. Whereas before, if you were a 6, 7, 8-year-old child, you didn't go no further than the corner this way and back to the corner that way, so that your mother can look out the door and see you. Okay? So your world was very small unless you were a boy. Then perhaps you can get on a bike and ride around the corner and not be seen and venture out a little more, But overall, the values were not under assault like our values are under assault today from external influences and stimuli our children are being exposed to. So we were very blessed. So talk about some of the other wonderful blessings you remember as a child growing up in Argyle Gardens.
Oakdale
Gardens. Maybe
Just
share
so
a little
many.
history. You have a little history. It was for the military, veterans.
I
what
do
was the
know
history?
that my father was a veteran, and I believe that veterans were kind of influenced to take advantage of those opportunities. And, I just can't say enough very, very positive things about public housing at that time.
Yes, yes.
We took very much pride in the exterior as well as the interior of where we lived. We had immaculate manicured lawns.
Oh, you were telling me about that. You had the lawn contests.
Yes.
Ah.
We would have an annual community parade. And then families.
I think that still goes on. The parade.
I've heard. Unfortunately, I'm not as connected to the community as I once was.
Yes.
But I do know that from what I do know, there's been a lot of restructuring and renovation and new development in the gardens, and that's refreshing. That's very, very good and pleasing to hear because it's an exceptional community. I love where I grew up.
Yes.
I love the school, the schools that I attended there.
Yes.
We have an annual community picnic and reunion every year.
Okay.
I try to attend if I'm in town.
Yes.
And the old faces and the
Right.
it's just
wonderful.
unbelievable to reconnect
Yes.
to people that lived in that
The
community,
community, grew up in
at
that
the
community.
time when the
Yes.
community was not called a project.
Right.
For some reason, it has somewhat of a negative connotation.
It is.
Project.
Yeah, project.
I mean, it's a community.
I'm a product of the project.
Yes. It's a
Very negative.
community and a very, very
Yes.
beautiful community.
It is.
And a
well
beautiful
designed.
place.
The whole architectural layout is extraordinary.
Yes.
The way they interconnected the homes with the community and the schools and the churches in that community.
Yes.
But your generation, perhaps I'm told, is one of the most successful generations in terms of academics, careers, professional
Absolutely.
people.
We've
There's
had
still a lot of rave over that era and that timeline that you came through there.
Very prominent,
doctors
a
and
lot
lawyers,
of very prominent
professional people.
They came out of Oakdale Gardens and some of the other communities.
Yes.
Very prominent people
Right.
that I'm proud to say that our education educated some very successful professionals. And it's refreshing.
It is to know. And we did classes down there in Argyle Gardens back in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Okay.
And one of the schools were the Catholic school there. You remember there was a Catholic school
Absolutely.
there? And that was kind of interesting because they provided a Catholic education for those children or those parents who wanted to send their children to Catholic school.
My very best girlfriend went to she was a Catholic, so she went to the church, but she went to public school,
Right. But that was right there in the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and when it transformed into a public school, they named it after a resident.
But you know what was so interesting about the Catholic school and the Catholic Church?
Yes.
They too got involved in the community and provided recreational activities. We used to skate.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
the
we
Catholic? Oh,
absolutely.
okay, because they got a big gym there.
Yes, we used to
Yes.
skate there.
Right, okay.
And they had other social activities and cultural activities that they provided, in
Yes.
addition to
Yes.
what the administration of that community provided.
Oh,
We had a
wow.
phenomenal children's building,
Oh.
and it was called the Children's Building.
Right, I've been in that
And
building.
inside
I
of the
know.
children's building
Right,
was
yes.
just numerous recreational activities for the children of Oakdale Gardens.
Gardens, right. And that's what made the quality of life there so rich. And in fact, the Catholic school, that's where we started teaching etiquette at. They named it the Lord Bond School. And Dr. Bond was a resident of Argyle Gardens.
Okay.
He was raised and went to school there, so they
Okay.
named the school after him,
Okay.
the Lord Bond Elementary School there.
Okay.
And so we did teach classes there, and I had the opportunity to meet that gentleman who was celebrated for his success in life as a physician.
Yes.
And
Okay.
he deserved it. I mean, he was one of those huge successes that came perhaps out of your generation,
Yes.
to go on and do great things with his life.
So many.
Yeah.
There were so many
Yeah.
very
Yes.
prominent people that came out of the gardens that worked hard and still make some contributions to
Yes.
Oakdale Gardens.
Yes. There are some, I think one of our school principals mentioned there was a young man, Principal Campbell.
Yes.
He mentioned a young man that come out of Argyle Gardens that was in his class. I can't remember the exact set of circumstances. Do you remember him sharing that story with us?
I do. And how,
there he was on the stage somewhere with some very important dignitaries.
Exactly.
And he said, "That's one of my students."
And it doesn't surprise me.
No.
It doesn't surprise me because, like I said, some very prominent people came out of Oakdale Gardens,
Yeah.
and it's proud. I'm very proud
Yes.
to say that that was part of my upbringing.
Upbringing.
Yes, that community really helped shape, make, and mold me
Yes.
to who I am today.
Yes. It's a great community, and we've had the opportunity to teach there at the high school level, at the military academy there, and I got to know many of those families there, the grandparents in particular, because what we taught, they really loved, because etiquette was primary to their upbringing.
Exactly.
And they wanted their children to be taught in etiquette.
Exactly.
And we probably can go back tomorrow and they'll bring us back and we can teach down there again.
Well, that's what's so important. I hope and I wish that the education community can see the value in what we're doing, promoting etiquette education,
Yes.
manners and morals, and see the value, see where how it can shape, make, and mold young people to be very honorable human beings and very strive to be to want more and believe that they're entitled to.
Yes.
And it's just so important.
Yes, it's really one of the things that we feel so energized about because we are in the classroom. We see those children eye to eye, and we connect with them, and they become our children, and that's how you have to feel. You have to love them like they're your own child, in order to understand that what you're providing is such value, has such value to it. And we just thought this would be a great subject for this
I'm
show.
so glad that we came up with this because
Yes. Last minute.
but it's a powerful subject.
It is.
And it really it shows the foundation
Yes.
of a person's background.
Yes.
And it shows how we can incorporate something
Yes. Of value. Of
most
value.
definitely.
Yes. But I want to thank you for sharing with our audience that wonderful, wonderful history of yours. And I'm seeing the 1 minute sign come up, so I better move on up and put this on the overhead so that you can contact us. You can reach us at 312-473-2942, or please, we would rather if you email us at info@efoi.org, and we promise to return your message when you send it out to us. So, Madam, with that, I would like to give you the honors of closing out the show.
Community, families, people, bring in your collective ideas. Reach back and get some of the traditions that we all know works.
Works, right?
And let's begin to build our communities with the respect and the pride and the dignity that it so deserves.
Absolutely. 2 cheers for that. And 2020 is going to be an outstanding year for etiquette. Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yes. And with that, we'll say good evening, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.